The year was 2147, and humanity had just begun to spread beyond Earth. The first colony on Mars was only 3 years old. The moon had become a busy place filled with research stations and mining operations. Humans were taking their first real steps into the universe, but they had no idea that someone had been watching them for a very long time. Dr. Morgan worked at the Lunar Deep Space Array, a massive facility built on the dark side of the moon. Her job was to listen to the stars. Every day she sat at her station and monitored signals from distant galaxies, searching for any sign of intelligent life. Most days she heard nothing but static and the natural sounds of the cosmos. But on this particular morning, everything changed. The signal came through at exactly 6:47 a.m. lunar time. Almost missed it because she was drinking her coffee and thinking about her sister back on Earth. But then her computer made a sound she had never heard before. It was the alert for a structured signal, something that could not be natural, something that had to come from an intelligent source. Put down her coffee and stared at her screen. The signal was strong and clear. It was coming from a star system about 40 light years away, but that was not the strange part. The strange part was that the signal was in English. She called her colleague Jake Palmer into the room. Jake was a former Air Force pilot who now worked security at the array. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen many strange things during his years of service. But even Jake looked surprised when he saw what was on the screen. The message was long and detailed. It came from a group called the Galactic Harmony Accord, a coalition of 12 different alien species who had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. They explained that they had been observing Earth since before humans discovered fire. They had watched humanity grow and develop and struggle through countless wars and disasters. And now that humans had finally developed the technology to receive their message, they wanted to offer a formal welcome. Read the message out loud, her voice shaking slightly. The aliens called themselves friends of all intelligent life. They spoke of peace and cooperation and the sharing of knowledge. They said they had helped many young species join the galactic community, and they wanted to do the same for humanity. But there was one part of the message that made Jake frown. The aliens referred to humans as gentle creatures from a harsh world. They said they understood that Earth was a difficult place to live, and they promised to help humanity overcome its primitive nature. Jake crossed his arms and stared at the screen. He had spent 20 years flying combat missions for the Air Force. He had survived 3 crashes, 2 wars, and a training accident that had killed 6 of his friends. He did not think of himself as gentle, and he did not think of humanity as primitive. Sent the message to Earth immediately. Within hours, it had reached the United Earth Council, the governing body that managed all of humanity's off-world activities. The council members read the message with a mixture of excitement and concern. This was the greatest discovery in human history. They were not alone in the universe, but the tone of the alien message bothered many of them. Admiral Brooks was put in charge of drafting humanity's official response, was 62 years old and had spent his entire adult life in the military. He had commanded ships, led troops into battle, and survived situations that would have broken most people. He was not a man who scared easily, but he was also not a man who liked being underestimated. Read the alien message several times in his office aboard the orbital station Sentinel. His aide, Lieutenant Torres, stood quietly nearby and waited for his reaction. Laughed softly when he finished reading. It was not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh a person makes when they realize someone has made a very big mistake. Asked him what was funny. Looked at her and shook his head. He said the aliens had been watching humanity for thousands of years, but they had clearly not been paying close attention. They thought humans were gentle. They thought Earth was just another difficult planet. They had no idea what they were dealing with. Told to get him a direct channel to the lunar array. He was going to write the response himself, and he was going to make sure the aliens understood exactly what kind of species they had just invited into their peaceful little galaxy. The news of the alien message spread across Earth like fire. People celebrated in the streets. Scientists wept with joy. Religious leaders debated what this meant for their faiths. Politicians made speeches about a new era of peace and cooperation. Everyone was excited about the possibility of meeting beings from another world. But in military headquarters around the planet, the reaction was different. Generals and admirals read the alien message and noticed the same thing had noticed. The aliens thought humans were weak. They thought they were doing humanity a favor by offering their help. They clearly did not understand that humans had survived everything their planet had thrown at them and had come out stronger every time. Spent 3 days working on the response. He consulted with scientists who could explain the true nature of Earth. He talked to historians who could describe the long and bloody story of human civilization. He spoke with doctors who could detail the remarkable abilities of the human body. And when he was finished, he had created a message that would change the course of galactic history. Morgan was still at her station when the response was ready to be sent. She had barely slept in 3 days. She read through the message that had written, and for a moment she felt almost sorry for the aliens who would receive it. The message was polite and professional. It thanked the Galactic Harmony Accord for their welcome and their offer of friendship. But it also contained a detailed explanation of what Earth really was and what humans had endured to become the dominant species on their planet. Press the button to send the transmission. The signal raced outward into the darkness of space, carrying words that would soon cause panic in civilizations that had never known fear. Jake stood beside her and watched the signal strength indicator on her screen. He asked her if she thought the aliens would be happy with the response. Shook her head slowly. She said she did not think happy was the right word. She thought terrified might be more accurate. Jake nodded and said that was probably fair. After all, the aliens had asked to meet humanity. Now they were going to find out what that really meant. Admiral Brooks had written many messages during his long career. He had sent orders that sent soldiers into battle. He had written letters to the families of those who did not come home. He had composed diplomatic communications that prevented wars and others that started them. But the message he was about to send into space was unlike anything he had ever written before. The transmission began with simple courtesy. Thanked the Galactic Harmony Accord for reaching out to humanity. He expressed appreciation for their patience in waiting for humans to develop the technology to receive their signal. He acknowledged their offer of friendship and their desire to welcome humanity into the galactic community. Then he got to the point. Explained that there seemed to be a misunderstanding about the nature of Earth and its dominant species. The aliens had referred to humans as gentle creatures from a harsh world. Wanted to correct this impression before any further contact was made. He started with the planet itself. Earth, wrote, was what human scientists classified as a Class 4. This was the second highest danger rating possible. The planet's atmosphere contained a gas called oxygen, which was highly corrosive and combustible. Humans breathed this gas constantly. Their bodies had evolved to not only survive it but to require it for life. The planet's star bombarded Earth with radiation every single day. Humans had developed a layer of pigment in their skin to protect themselves from this radiation. Those with more pigment could survive longer exposure. Those with less had to be more careful. But all humans lived under this constant assault from their own sun. Described the weather patterns of Earth. He wrote about hurricanes that could level entire cities. He described tornadoes that appeared without warning and destroyed everything in their path. He mentioned floods that drowned thousands and droughts that starved millions. He explained that these events were not rare catastrophes. They were regular occurrences that humans had learned to endure. The ground itself was not safe. Wrote about earthquakes that could shake down buildings and open cracks in the earth. He described volcanoes that could bury entire regions under ash and molten rock. He mentioned that humanity had witnessed several mass extinction events in their planet's history, including one that had wiped out the giant reptiles that once ruled the world. Then moved on to the life forms of Earth. The oceans were filled with predators that could kill a human in seconds. There were fish with razor-sharp teeth that hunted in packs. There were creatures that could sting a person to death with a single touch. There were animals so large they could swallow a human whole. And yet, humans had learned to swim in these same oceans for recreation. The land was no safer. Described the predators that stalked the forests and plains of Earth. He wrote about venomous snakes and spiders that could kill with a single bite. He mentioned parasites that could burrow into human flesh and diseases that had killed more people than all the wars in human history combined. And then he described humanity itself. Humans, explained, were persistence predators. This was a type of hunting strategy that few species in the galaxy had ever developed. Humans did not rely on speed or strength or venom to catch their prey. Instead, they simply followed their target until it collapsed from exhaustion. A human could walk and run for hours without stopping. Their bodies could regulate their temperature through sweat, allowing them to keep moving when other animals had to rest. They did not give up. They did not stop. They kept coming until they got what they wanted. Described the human body in detail. Humans could heal from wounds that would kill most other species. Their bones could mend themselves. Their skin could close over cuts and scrapes. Their immune systems could fight off infections that would devastate other organisms. A human could lose a limb and continue to survive. They could suffer damage to their organs and still function. But the most remarkable thing about humans was their minds. Wrote about the human capacity for violence and the equally powerful capacity for love. He described how humans had waged war upon each other for their entire existence, developing ever more terrible weapons to destroy their enemies. They had split the atom and used it to create explosions that could level entire cities. They had built weapons that could end all life on their planet. And yet they had also created art and music and literature. They had developed medicine and science and philosophy. They had reached out to the stars not because they wanted to conquer, but because they wanted to explore. They were a species of contradictions, capable of both great cruelty and great kindness. Included data with his message. He attached medical files that showed human healing rates. He sent recordings of human athletic competitions where men and women pushed their bodies to the absolute limit for no reason other than the joy of competition. He included historical footage of human wars, not to threaten, but to educate. He wanted the aliens to understand what they were dealing with. The final section of the message was simple and direct. Wrote that humanity accepted the welcome of the Galactic Harmony Accord. Humans were eager to meet their galactic neighbors and to learn from them. They hoped for peaceful relations and mutual cooperation. But also included a warning. He wrote that humans did not respond well to threats. They did not surrender easily. They did not give up when times were hard. If the galaxy wanted humanity as a friend, that friendship would be rewarded with loyalty and protection. But if anyone made the mistake of treating humans as enemies, they would discover why humanity had survived everything there had thrown at them. The message ended with a simple statement that had written himself. "We are coming, we hope you are ready." Lieutenant Torres read the message before it was sent. She looked at with wide eyes and asked if he really wanted to include all of this. She worried that it might frighten the aliens or make them think humans were dangerous. Smiled and said that was exactly the point. He did not want the galaxy to underestimate humanity. He did not want alien species to see humans as primitive creatures who needed to be guided and protected. He wanted them to understand that humans were survivors. They were fighters. They were a species that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain on a planet that seemed designed to kill them. If that scared the aliens, so be it. Better they be scared and respectful than dismissive and condescending. The message was sent on a Tuesday afternoon Earth time. It traveled through space at the speed of light, carrying its cargo of truth toward civilizations that had never known true danger. Watched the transmission indicator until it confirmed the signal was away. Then he leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. The galaxy was about to meet humanity. He hoped they would appreciate what they were getting. The message from Earth arrived on what should have been an ordinary day. Ambassador was in her office reviewing trade agreements when her assistant rushed in with a data tablet clutched in her trembling hands. The assistant said nothing. She simply handed over the tablet and stepped back with fear in her eyes. Was a tall and slender being with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Her species had evolved on a peaceful world where the worst natural disaster was a mild rainstorm. They had never needed to fight for survival. They had simply existed in harmony with their gentle planet until they developed space travel and joined the galactic community. She read the human message 3 times before she fully understood what it said. Each time she read it, her heart beat faster. By the 3rd reading, she felt something she had never experienced before in her 200 years of life. She felt genuine terror. Immediately called an emergency session of the High Chamber. The 12 delegates of the Galactic Harmony Accord gathered in the Great Hall on the station that served as their central meeting place. They came from worlds scattered across the galaxy, but they all shared one thing in common. None of them had ever evolved on a world like Earth. Delegate of the collective was the largest being in the room. His species resembled giant insects with hard shells and multiple limbs. They had evolved on a forest world where cooperation was the key to survival. They built their civilizations in the trees and never developed weapons because they never needed them. Counselor Prim of the Federation was the smallest delegate. Her species looked like floating clouds of light that communicated through patterns of color. They had evolved in the upper atmosphere of a gas giant where there were no predators and no competition for resources. High Counselor was the eldest member of the Accord. He was over 500 years old and had seen many species join the galactic community. His own people were amphibious beings from an ocean world where life moved slowly and peacefully. He had thought he understood the universe. He had thought he had seen everything. The human message proved him wrong. Stood before the assembly and read the message aloud. She tried to keep her voice steady, but it shook when she reached the part about persistence predators. She had to stop and explain what this meant because none of the other species had ever encountered such a thing. She told them that humans hunted by chasing their prey until it died from exhaustion. They did not need to be fast. They did not need to be strong. They simply needed to keep moving. Their bodies could run and walk for hours without stopping. Their prey would sprint away and rest, thinking they were safe. But the humans would keep coming. They always kept coming. The chamber fell silent. Delegate clicked his mandibles together nervously. He asked if this was some kind of exaggeration. Surely no civilized species could have evolved from such brutal methods. Activated the data files that came with the message. She showed them footage of human endurance competitions. She displayed medical data showing how quickly human bodies could heal from injuries. She played recordings of human wars, ancient and modern, showing the devastating weapons they had created to destroy each other. Counselor Prim flickered with distress. She asked why any species would create weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. Said she did not know, but the humans had done it. They had built weapons that could end all life on Earth, and yet they had not used them. They had held that power in their hands and chosen not to unleash it. This meant they had self-control. It also meant they understood destruction on a level that no Accord species could imagine. High Counselor spoke slowly when the presentation was finished. He said the Accord had made a terrible mistake. For thousands of years, they had observed Earth from a distance. They had watched human broadcasts and studied their societies. They had concluded that humans were a young and naive species who would be grateful for guidance and assistance. They had been completely wrong. Said the Accord had assumed all intelligent life followed a similar path. They thought every species evolved through cooperation and peaceful coexistence. They thought the galaxy was a place where violence was rare and harmony was the natural state of things. They had never considered that a species could be forged by conflict. They had never imagined that a world could be so dangerous that only the strongest and most stubborn creatures survived. Delegates said they should rescind the invitation immediately. They should close their borders and deny the humans entry to Accord space. If these creatures were as dangerous as their message suggested, they could not be allowed to spread through the galaxy. Shook her head sadly. She reminded the assembly that the welcome message had included the coordinates of all major Accord systems. This was standard practice when inviting a new species into the community. They wanted young civilizations to know they were surrounded by friends. Now those coordinates were in human hands. A ripple of fear passed through the chamber. The delegates looked at each other with wide eyes and trembling bodies. Said if the humans could not be kept out, then the Accord must prepare for war. They must build weapons and train soldiers. They must become like the humans if they wanted to survive. Raised his hand for silence. He said war was the worst possible option. If the human message was accurate, if they truly were the survivors of then no amount of preparation would save the Accord in a direct conflict. Humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. They knew war in ways the Accord could never understand. No, said, the only path forward was diplomacy. They had to ensure that humans saw the Accord as friends rather than enemies. They had to prove that they were not a threat. They had to hope that the same species capable of such terrible violence was also capable of mercy and restraint. Asked how they could befriend a species born of violence. Admitted that he did not know, but he said they had no other choice. The humans were coming. The Accord could either meet them with open hands or clenched fists. He prayed that open hands would be enough. The emergency session lasted for 6 hours. When it was over, the delegates returned to prepare their people for the most important first contact in galactic history. None of them slept well that night. 6 months passed between the exchange of messages and the day humanity arrived in Accord space. During that time, the humans built a ship specifically for this mission. They called it the Endeavor because the name represented their spirit. Humans were always trying to do new things, to go new places, to push beyond their limits. This mission was the greatest endeavor of all. Captain Danny was chosen to lead the expedition. He was 45 years old with brown hair that was turning gray at the temples and calm green eyes that had seen both war and peace. Danny had served in the military for 20 years before transferring to the new space exploration program. He was patient and thoughtful and slow to anger. The people who selected him believed he was the perfect person to represent humanity to the galaxy. The Endeavor carried a crew of 40 men and women. They were scientists and soldiers, doctors and engineers, diplomats and translators. Each of them understood the importance of their mission. They were not just exploring space. They were introducing humanity to civilizations that had existed for thousands of years before humans learned to make fire. Lieutenant Commander Amy served as first officer. She was a brilliant tactician with a calm demeanor that matched the captain's. Amy had studied everything the Accord had sent about their member species. She knew their histories and cultures and customs. She understood that these aliens were afraid of humanity, even if they tried to hide it. The Endeavor entered Accord space on a bright morning by Earth time. Danny stood on the bridge and watched through as an escort vessel approached. The alien ship was beautiful in a way that human ships were not. It had smooth curves and elegant lines. It looked like a work of art rather than a machine. The human ship looked very different. The Endeavor was covered in thick armor plates. Its weapons were visible and ready. Its design was purely functional, built to survive the harsh realities of space travel. There was no elegance in its lines, only strength and purpose. Amy noticed that the ship was keeping its distance. She mentioned this to Danny and said the aliens seemed afraid of them. Danny nodded slowly. He had expected this. He told Amy that they would need to be very careful in how they conducted themselves. Every word and gesture would be watched and analyzed. The future of human and alien relations depended on how this first meeting went. They directed the Endeavor to a space station called Horizon's Rest. It was a massive structure that served as a meeting place for Accord representatives. The station was filled with beings from all 12 member species, though many of them had found reasons to be elsewhere when the humans arrived. Ambassador met the human delegation at the docking bay. She was accompanied by 3 guards, though everyone knew the guards would be useless if the humans decided to cause trouble. The guards were there for comfort, not protection. Was surprised by her first impression of the humans. She had expected them to be large and imposing, like the predators in the videos they had sent. Instead, they were smaller than her, with soft skin and round faces. They moved with a strange efficiency that was hard to describe. Every step seemed purposeful, every gesture controlled. Danny approached and extended his hand. He knew from his briefings that they understood this gesture from their studies of Earth broadcasts. A handshake was a sign of peaceful greeting among humans. Hesitated for a moment, then she reached out and placed her hand in his. Danny was being as gentle as he possibly could. He barely squeezed at all, but even that slight pressure made his eyes widen with pain. She pulled her hand back and stared at it, flexing her long fingers slowly. Danny apologized immediately. He said humans sometimes forgot their own strength when dealing with other species. He had been trying to be careful. Looked at him with something between fear and fascination. She asked if that was truly him being gentle. Danny nodded with an awkward smile. He said yes, that was him holding back. The first meeting was held in a large conference room with windows that looked out into space. Danny and Amy sat across from an high counselor. The atmosphere was tense but not hostile. Both sides wanted this to go well. Danny began by thanking the Accord for their welcome. He said humanity was honored to be invited into the galactic community. Humans had spent their entire existence looking up at the stars and wondering what was out there. Now they finally had an answer. Asked what humanity wanted from the Accord. His voice was calm, but his body language showed nervousness. He kept his hands folded tightly on the table as if afraid to move them. Danny said humanity wanted exactly what the Accord had offered: friendship and cooperation, trade and cultural exchange, the chance to learn from species who had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. Humans had so much to discover, and they hoped the Accord would be willing to share their knowledge. Asked about the weapons on the human ship. She asked why a vessel on a peaceful mission needed such heavy armament. Danny considered his answer carefully. He said the Endeavor was built to survive. Space was dangerous, and humans had learned to always be prepared for the worst. The weapons were not meant to threaten the Accord. They were simply part of how humans approach the universe. Hope for the best but prepare for everything else. Amy added that humans had a saying about this. They said it was better to have something and not need it than to need something and not have it. This applied to weapons as much as anything else. The negotiations continued for several hours. The humans asked questions about Accord technology and society. The Accord representatives asked questions about Earth and human culture. Both sides were careful and polite, but there was an undercurrent of tension that never fully disappeared. At one point, asked Danny directly why humans had created weapons capable of destroying their own planet. It was the question that had haunted the Accord since they received the human message. Danny was quiet for a long moment before answering. He said humans had created those weapons during a time of great conflict. Different nations on Earth had feared each other and believed that only overwhelming power could keep them safe. It was not their proudest moment as a species. But then something remarkable happened. Humans realized that they could not use these weapons without destroying themselves, so they chose not to use them. They held the power of extinction in their hands and decided to put it down. Danny said this was what made him proud of humanity, not that they had created such terrible things, but that they had chosen not to use them. Nodded slowly. He said perhaps there was hope for the galaxy after all. Any species capable of such restraint might also be capable of great wisdom. The first meeting ended on a cautiously optimistic note. Agreements were made for further negotiations. Plans were discussed for human ambassadors to visit Accord. The future was uncertain, but it seemed like it might be peaceful. As the Endeavor departed from Horizon's Rest, Danny stood at the bridge window and looked back at the station growing smaller in the distance. Amy stood beside him and asked what he was thinking. Danny said he was thinking that this was just the beginning. Humanity had taken its first step into a larger universe. Now they had to prove that they deserved to be there. 1 year after first contact, the Galactic Harmony Accord discovered that they had more to fear than humanity. A fleet of warships emerged from the uncharted regions of space and began attacking Accord colonies without warning or mercy. The attackers called themselves the Dominion, and they had been watching the galaxy for a long time, waiting for the right moment to strike. They were conquerors. Their civilization was built on the bones of species they had defeated and enslaved. They had avoided Accord space for centuries because there was easier prey elsewhere. But now they had grown bold. They had watched the Accord welcome humanity into their community, and they saw this as a sign of weakness. The peaceful species of the Accord were inviting predators into their midst because they could not protect themselves. They decided to teach the Accord a lesson about the true nature of the universe. The first attack destroyed a colony world. 3 million beings died in a single day. The Accord defense fleet arrived too late to do anything but count the dead. The ships were fast and elegant, but they had never been designed for real combat. They crumbled against the weapons like paper against fire. More attacks followed. A research station was destroyed. An agricultural world was invaded and its population taken as slaves. Every time the Accord tried to mount a defense, they were pushed back. Their ships were too weak. Their soldiers had never known true war. They had spent thousands of years living in peace, and now they had forgotten how to fight. High Counselor called an emergency session of the High Chamber. The delegates were terrified. Some of them had lost family in the attacks. Others had watched their burn from the safety of their diplomatic vessels. None of them knew what to do. Delegates said what everyone was thinking. The Accord needed to ask the humans for help. The chamber fell silent. Every delegate understood what this meant. If they asked the humans for military assistance, they would be admitting that they could not protect themselves. They would be placing their survival in the hands of the very species they had feared. Spoke quietly. She said she had spent the past year getting to know the human ambassador stationed on her. His name was Danny, and he had been promoted to Commodore after his successful first contact mission. She said Danny was not the monster she had expected. He was patient and kind and genuinely interested in Accord culture. He reminded her that humans were capable of more than just violence. She said if they were going to trust any species to save them, it should be the humans. Closed his eyes and bowed his head. He said was right. The Accord had no other choice. They could ask the humans for help and survive, or they could refuse and watch everything they had built be destroyed. The request was sent to Earth that same day. The response came within hours. Commodore Danny led the human fleet into Accord space 3 weeks later. The ships had been assembled from across the solar system, pulled from patrol duties and training exercises to respond to the Accord's call. There were only 12 vessels in the fleet, far fewer than the hundreds of ships the commanded. But these were human ships, designed and built by a species that had been fighting wars since before they learned to write. The flagship was called the Ironclad. It was the largest warship humanity had ever built, a massive vessel bristling with weapons and covered in armor so thick that nothing could penetrate it. Danny stood on the bridge as the fleet approached the position, watching the enemy ships on his tactical display. Amy served as his second in command, just as she had on the Endeavor. She studied the formation and said they outnumbered the human fleet by at least 20-1. Danny nodded calmly. He said those were better odds than he had expected. Amy smiled slightly. She asked if he was joking. Danny said he was not. Humans had won battles against worse odds. They would do it again today. The battle began at 600 hours station time. The fleet moved to intercept the human ships, confident in their superior numbers. They had crushed the Accord with ease. They expected the humans to be no different. They were wrong. The human ships did not retreat when they took damage. They did not flee when they were surrounded. They pushed forward into the heart of the formation, firing their weapons continuously, absorbing hits that would have destroyed Accord vessels. When one human ship was crippled, its crew kept fighting until the life support failed. When another was boarded by soldiers, the human crew fought them hand to hand in the corridors until there were no enemies left standing. They had never faced anything like this. They were predators who preyed on the weak. They did not know how to handle an enemy that would not stop fighting. The battle lasted less than 2 hours. When it was over, the fleet was scattered and burning. Their flagship had been rammed by a human destroyer whose captain had refused to surrender even as his ship fell apart around him. The commander was dead, killed by a boarding party that had fought through 3 decks of enemy soldiers to reach him. Danny opened a channel to all surviving ships. His voice was calm and steady as he delivered humanity's message. He told them that they had attacked the friends of humanity. They had threatened innocent lives and enslaved peaceful species. He said humans did not forgive easily and they did not forget. He told them to leave this region of space and never return. If they came back, humanity would find them, and humanity would finish what had been started today. They fled. In the aftermath of the battle, High Counselor traveled to the Ironclad to meet with Danny personally. The old alien looked at the human commander with eyes that held both gratitude and sorrow. Said when the Accord first sent their message to Earth, they thought they were welcoming a young and naive species into their community. They thought they would teach humanity the ways of peace and guide them toward harmony. Danny asked what he thought now. Sighed deeply. He said the Accord had been fools. They had lived in peace for so long that they forgot the universe could be dangerous. They had looked at humanity and seen only the violence in their history. They had not understood that the same strength that made humans terrifying also made them protectors. He said the Accord had sent a welcome message to Earth, expecting gratitude and submission. Instead, they received warriors who were willing to die for species they had only known for a year. Danny placed his hand gently on the old counselor's shoulder. He was careful not to squeeze too hard. He told that humans were not the monsters the Accord had feared. They were simply very good at surviving. And now the Accord would survive too, because humanity had decided to protect them. Nodded slowly. He said the Accord would always remember this day. They would always remember that when darkness came, the of Earth stood between them and destruction. The galaxy had changed forever. The Galactic Harmony Accord had invited humanity into their peaceful community and discovered something they never expected. They had found guardians, and though they often regretted their initial assumptions about the fierce species from Earth, they never regretted sending that first welcome message. Humanity had come to the stars, and the galaxy was safer because of it.